Let's conclude the story then. Escapades of Fay Willows, Book 4. These books seem to be part of a series, but curiously this next entry seems to be a fourth installment. After a brief search, you fail to find second and third titles anywhere within the library, although you do find a broken, magical security ward, likely to support theft attempts of tomes from the shelves. Examining the device, you see signs to show it's nullified by anti-magic forces. Chapter 1. Exhaustive Travel. The endurance of an ogre is quite astonishing. While I collapsed from exhaustion, the ogres have persevered, staying awake until we made it to the abandoned settlement. In particular, while many of the ogres have managed to acquire some Shaloran of me, the commander strives to go on and make the entire drain at Elvala while it's sleeping. I honestly don't believe any race can possibly stay awake, let alone as active, for that long. I don't know how much time I spent along the hill shoreline. Perhaps days, over a week? It was good to see some sons of greenery and living nature again regardless. Making our way into the area just south of Nargo lands, I basked a little in the natural sunlight from the sky. Then I felt the rumbling in my stomach, reminding me that I had not eaten for quite a while now. The ogres for their part did not seem the least bit hungry or tired, but after such extensive travel, I wonder if this is truly the case. Reaching for my pack, I pulled out my provisions and laid them out one by one on the ground. Almost immediately, I noticed a rather stare from the ogres. Have you ever seen a hungry ogre? Within an instant, they will eat any food put in front of them. I barely had time to get away before the entire group converged on the tasty morsels that come into our view. When I looked back next, all that I had laid out was gone, and the ogres were now rushing for my backpack. After failing to find anything more to eat, they adopted some civility once more. The commander got up and came over to thank me for the food, asking that I excuse himself and the others. That didn't do anything for our own hunger, but I'm glad they enjoyed filling their stomachs, I guess. From behind me the Strategist approached, with one of the remaining rations clutched in his hand. I hastily snatched at the food when it was offered, before one of the other ogres might see it. Half of it had already been eaten, but considering how hungry I was, I didn't really care. Both the commander and the strategist seemed to chuckle as they consumed the food. As the ogres regained their composure though, I could see the reality of the situation creep back into their faces. Once again, I could see a dark blue glow appear over the eyes of the commander's face, looking in the direction of the southern shoreline. "Any sign of them?" the strategist asked. "No, but it is mirror to clear," the commander responded. I don't remember much of what was said next. During the following conversation that occurred between the commander and the strategist, I would lose consciousness. I do at least recall, though, that the strategist would relinquish the leadership role to the commander once more. When I woke next, I found myself sandwiched between a couple of ogres, atop several mattresses. A repulsive aroma tickled my nose, and I looked over to see a skewered wolf being turned on a campfire. Rolling around to get my bearings, I noticed that the ogres had apparently made camp in the middle of what looked to be a settlement, likely one abandoned by Shaloran. I could see most of our ogres sleeping on an assortment of furniture, grass, and other items, likely scavenged from nearby homes. The scarred ogre, who was turning a skewer, took notice of my stirring. He shouted out loudly that I had awakened, the commander and strategist soon emerging from behind one of the buildings. "How are you doing, Falor?" the strategist called out. "Did you rest well?" I groggily sat up straight, not yet fully awake. "I'll rest better when we get to Elvala," I replied. "What has happened?" To this I received a quick story. We had arrived at the outskirts of Shaloran territory, the ogres having carried me here after I collapsed. The strategist had noted that what appeared to be scouts for the fanatics had been following us, though they were hanging back in the far in the distance. Whether any more fanatics were nearby was unknown, although the commander had been actively keeping watch for any sign of trouble. "We cannot linger here much longer," the strategist would finish saying. Looking at the ogre, I asked, "When will we be heading out?" Before the strategist even had a chance to reply, the commander interjected with a great bellow, "Immediately after you had something to eat." I could tell from the commander's facial expressions that he was suggesting what was hanging over the fire. I was a bit disgusted by the thought of this, so I knew I would go acquire my own meal. The commander paused for a moment when I said this, but with a sigh told him to be quick, and turned to rouse the rest of the ogres. After a little while of searching for the nearby buildings, I noticed a trap door with a rusty lock. Breaking the lock and ascending the ladder, I found a cellar untouched since the time of the original Shaloran inhabitants, maybe even before the Spellblaze. There was a considerable amount of bottled wine, but also ample proportions of old vegetables and dried fruit that looked edible enough. I brushed away some cobwebs from a nearby chair and table, and proceeded to eat my fill. Satisfying my hunger, I then picked up a couple bundles of produce, and carried them back to the campsite. The commander was already assembling our ogres when I returned. I saw that a couple of recently killed carcasses were slung on his guard ogre's shoulders, while some of our ogres have now armed themselves with our weapons and tools have been laying about. A couple ogres also haphazardly wore some bits of armor, partially covering their vital areas. Seeing me carrying more food, a couple of the ogres would help take a load, and Astratus would ask where I had found it. I relayed the location of the cellar, which I had found, and noted that there was additional contents within. The commander, while interested in acquiring more supplies, was quite disinterested in the fact of where they were located. Concerned for the time it would take to bring it up, the commander noted that an ogre wouldn't be able to easily fit through any doors of the summit here, let alone trapdoors in one of the cellars. The strategist opined that I fit through and insisted that we take the food to ensure we had enough to eat for the remainder of our journey. The commander was hesitant at staying any longer but consented. After spending another half an hour, I was able to bring up all the food before we continued on to our Elvala. Chapter 2: Seeking Sanctuary. I want to emphasize that I come from a society where there's little practice magic, let alone any products of it such as runes. While there were Shaloran who were capable of casting spells, their knowledge was self-taught and done in secret. Not to mention that Shaloran users of magic were generally ostracized from the rest of the community when found out, if not exiled from forlorn lands. Even now, I still don't know much about the inner workings of the rune return as graphic to me. I am, however, working to learn the basics of runes, and a greater subject of the arcane forces behind them. The fanatic scouts continued to follow us as we moved deeper into Shaloran territory, but we're always careful to stay a fair distance away. It would be a couple more days before we reached the edge of the shroud. Navigating to where I first crossed through the misty wall again to the city, I took off my pack and rummaged through it looking for the rune return. Finding it, I took the rune out and presented it to the Ogre commander with an outstretched hand. I had expected him to take it, but he simply nodded his head and said, "A rune return." For the next brief moment I stood there with my hand held out. The commander clearly as puzzled as I was during interaction. It wasn't clear to him what was going on until the scarred ogre finally chimed in and stated, "You have no clue how that rune you're holding works, do you?" At this the commander blinked, before realizing the situation and remarking, "Right, you're a complete novice." I could feel the blank expression worn on my face, and the ogres were plainly aware of this. "Come over here, Falor," a voice called out. I turned my head to see who was calling me, before identifying it was the female ogre, the one who had helped with the infusions from before. "Let's see here, that rune you got." I was a bit confused, but I made my way over, and promptly displayed the rune to her. Taking it in one hand, she proceeded to examine the rune, before handing it back to me. "Right," the ogre began. "This here rune is bonded to you. Only you can inscribe it. After that is done, you can use this here rune to enter Elvala. Then you can request entry for us." It felt like the words popping out of the ogre's mouth were some type of different language. The ogre, who I eventually come to know as my instructor, gave a series of explanations about runes. Ultimately though, she decided it would just be best to graft the rune return on me, and forgo giving me a full lesson on rune theory. To ensure that I would have the least trouble activating the rune, the ogre chose to inscribe it on my back, just below my neck. I can remember how painful the experience was, as the nerves in my spine were pricked and prodded. Despite this though, I can also remember the exhilaration my body felt as it was touched by arcane forces for the first time. "There then, finished!" the female ogre said, pleased with her work. She then circled around me before putting her hands on my shoulders. "Now, all that is left for you to do is to activate the rune and get past this here barrier. Then you can make the request for our entry," she explained. "Falor, before I tell you what to do, know that I thank you for helping to bring us this far. If it hadn't been for you, we ogres, we likely would have all died." I could see the tears beginning to stream down her face, the scarred ogre then trotting over, once again ready to fill in on what was being said. "It seems our lives are in your hands yet again," the scarred ogre started. "We hope that you will be able to convince the Shaloran to let us in, but even if you can't, we want to thank you. All of us ogres want to thank you for helping us." Around me I could see our ogres bowing their heads. "I'm sure you'll be let in," I replied while smiling. "Tell me what it is I have to do." The female ogre then raised her head, wiped away the tears from her face, and started to walk me through the process to activate the rune. I gave a solemn nod to the ogres before performing the steps myself, the rune taking a lengthy moment before sending me on my way. Instantly, as the rune activated, my surroundings completely changed, and a bustling Shaloran was now visible all around me. I could feel a heavy sensation on my neck where the rune was, but other than that I felt no different. A few of the Shaloran turned and looked in my direction, unquestionably surprised at my entry, though not as much as I would have expected. "You're the Falor who helped us from before!" one of Shaloran called out. "Welcome back!" "Oh, thank you," I replied back, slowly adjusting to the fact that I had suddenly entered Elvala. Realizing the ogres were still outside waiting for me, I excused myself and started running to the middle of the city. Looking for the building where I previously met the general, I caught sight of the guards who had stood outside during my previous visit, and quickly made my way over to him. Panting and out of breath, I slowly gasped out, "Ogres, seeking asylum here in Shaloran lands." The guards stood in bewilderment after hearing the sentence I let out, gasping what I had said, but unable to determine what to do. Then from behind me came a voice. "What is this about ogres?" I turned around to see a young female Shaloran, who I recognized as being one of the mages who saw me off from Elvala. Seeing my face, the mage seemed to oddly cool a bit. "Oh, you're that Falor," she said. "We've never personally met, but I helped teleport you out a while ago. Welcome back to Elvala." Catching my breath, I explained the situation involving the ogres outside, emphasizing the fanatics chasing them, and how the ogres were seeking refuge from them. As I finished, the young Shaloran answered back. "Judging from what you told me, it would likely be best if the ogres were brought in promptly." Approaching the guards to communicate something, their male faces quickly became somewhat distressed by the words spoken to them by the Shaloran woman. I don't know what the mage had said, but it seemed as if the guards were almost pleading with the young Shaloran about something. Eventually, she called for me to follow her, and then set off in direction of Elva's former entrance. I could tell that the Shaloran had some plan in mind, perhaps one to allow the ogres to safe passage into the city. Before turning to follow her, I noticed the two guards murmur something to each other, before one of them rushed towards the door of a nearby building. The remaining guard turned and looked apprehensively in our direction as we walked away. Chapter 3: The Enchantress. Alraewyn Maj'Eyal, the foolhardy enchantress. Easily the worst conversationalist I've ever met. Among all the Shaloran I know of, none have a greater ego than hers. Still, I respect her sense of justice, along with her gifted abilities in arcane. Who knows what fate might befall the Ogres had she not been present when I made that emergency request for their entry. Along the way, the young mage probed me with varying questions relating to my travels, and of the events that had unfolded during them. Of those questions asked, though, the ones involving the treatment of the Ogres have stuck out in my mind the most. "So the Ogres, I've heard a little bit about them," the mage started commenting. "While they never really came over to Shaloran lands, I have heard some stories expressing their altruism and heroics. But from what you told me about those extremists, it seems very odd that they wouldn't have killed the Ogres outright. I mean, the Ogres have honestly managed to merge the bodies of arcane ruins. What more reason is there for someone who hates magic to just kill them then and there? For what purpose do you think those extremists kept them alive?" "I do not know the reason, nor do I care," I responded coldly to the question. "For what purpose would you attempt to discern any meaning from their deranged actions, anyways? I see little reason for you or any other Shaloran to care." Laughing at this, the young Shaloran replied back in a casual manner. "Perhaps you are right, but just because they seem to act mad to you, doesn't mean they pursue whatever their doctrines are aimlessly." He firmed up a bit before talking again. "They will likely be our enemies for sure in the future, but hopefully before we ever truly encounter them we can grasp their motives. If we can understand how they act, we can anticipate the moves they will make, and we can make plans to counter the schemes as a result." As we continued on, I noticed that the Shaloran was intently looking at me, or rather at the back of my neck. "Judging from where the ruin I crafted was placed," she remarked, "I guess the Ogres helped you with inscribing my ruin return." Taking a moment to process what the Shaloran said, I soon spouted, "You crafted?" The Shaloran smiled and laughed a bit. "Indeed I did," she proudly answered back. "A masterwork ruin, produced by the best enchantress among all the Shaloran. Though I'm wondering, why didn't you graft it on yourself? Are the Shaloran really that backwards when it comes to the arcane?" I remember the harsh expression I gave, which she immediately picked up on. "Right, I'll try to keep that in mind the next time I meet Falor," she replied. As the shroud came into sight, the enchantress asked where exactly the Ogres would specifically be on the other side. I noted to her that I left them in the same place where I had entered through on my first visit, directing her to the spot of my initial entry into Elvala with my hand. Standing stoically and raising her arms, she started singing in a low harmonic sound. Any skepticism I had as to what she planned was soon replaced with astonishment. The misty smoke in front of us slowly began to move and dance. Then a tunnel, smaller in size than the one I traversed the first time, formed in front of us to the Ogres on our side. Not missing a beat, I could see the Ogres begin to start moving toward us. After a few minutes, the first of them would begin to arrive from the walls of the Shaloran capital. Showing their exhaustion, they made their way over to us and collapsed onto the ground. Likely curious about this spectacle, I noticed a growing crowd of onlookers gathering to view the unexpected event occurring in front of them. As the last Ogre cleared the misty smoke, the mage put her arms down, and within the tunnel within the shroud collapsed. Finished, she stumbled about and gradually set herself down. Peering up at me with a smile on her face, she made a simple statement while gasping in and out. "It is done. You have led the Ogres to their safety." Indeed. Though this wasn't the proper way to go about it. I heard a voice state behind me, turning around to see the Shaloran general. I also noticed a large company of armored soldiers breaking their way through the onlookers. For a moment I wondered if there would be trouble, but the general would give the order to bring the Ogres to the healers, alleviating my fears. As the general began to approach us, his eyes seemed to dart quickly toward me. Stopping for a moment, he gave me a quick look over, before saying in a quiet but authoritative voice, "You should head over to the Ogres as well." He then continued on past me toward the Enchantress, standing above the young Shaloran as she slowly caught her breath. I could see him fold his arms. Deciding for now it would be best to follow the orders of the general, I proceeded to make my way to the healer's grounds. Naively thinking I would look for the chief healer to see how I could help out, I entered the building and approached the nearest healer inside. I can still remember the shock on the healer's face as he glanced up at me while I finished asking where the chief healer was. It hadn't even crossed my mind that the general had suggested I head to the healers for my own injuries, not for that of the Ogres. One by one, it felt like healer after healer would catch wind that I was in need of aid, before suddenly I must have had half the healers in the building tend to me. Even some of those that were originally helping the Ogres. I can't say I remember much of what happened next, nor could I recall feeling any pain from any of the injuries I apparently had. The healers, however, recognizing how critical a state I was really in, whisked me away to one of the empty beds. I was given several anesthetic infusions, which subsequently caused me to blank out. I would learn later that while the healers were initially gasped at how brutally injured I was, they were truly horrified when the adrenaline infusions they applied seemingly failed to have much effect, and their casting healing spells didn't do much either. It would take my body a couple months to recover, and to this day I'm told to be careful of injury due to how long it would take for my injuries to recuperate. When I finally came to, the healers checked me thoroughly over, and I was told someone would be coming in to see me. After a brief period of time, I was greeted by the Enchantress once more. "I see you are doing alright," she said. "You're certainly quite tough, Flora. Don't worry about the Ogres. Aurelian has granted him asylum." Speaking proudly as she finished saying those words, the Shaloran then oddly became more businesslike, both in posture and tone. "Now then," she began anew, "I realize you've only recently awakened, but Aurelian wants me to get the story from you. What transpired after you left for Nargle Kingdom to the point where you came back here? Perhaps as well, you might shed some light on why exactly it took you so long to heal." Chapter 4 Terrifying Interview. I do not know if Alvarin has forgiven me, for the terror I inflicted on her, and the hatred within me that she rejected too. While it was but a mere moment, I could tell that all my emotions had been challenged her very being. She knew what was inside me now, and how potentially dangerous that enemy could be. Ray, if you're reading this, know how truly sorry I am for what happened. For the next 2 hours, the Enchantress proceeded to grill me as to what had happened after I left Shaloran lands. In great detail I informed her of my experiences within the Nargle Kingdom and my subsequent travel along the southern shoreline of Maj'Eyal. Every so often the Inquisitor Shaloran would ask me questions about the fanatics I witnessed, the events I seen them carry out, or of activities they may have been a part of. To be honest, I couldn't tell if it was for her own satisfaction that she asked the questions, or because Rain had asked her to do so. However, it was as this conversation came to a close, the more shameful event of our discussion would occur. "So, that mostly concludes more or less what Rain had sent me here for," she began. "However, the healers also wanted me to ask you a few questions in regards to your body. I'm not sure if you've been told yet, but you've been in this hospital bed for quite some time now, despite injuries that should have healed in a number of weeks. You wouldn't perhaps have an explanation for why this is, would you?" Immediately, I wondered if perhaps what happened at Char Botfield was connected with my slow recovery time. I was finally realizing that something was wrong with me by this point, though to what extent I couldn't exactly tell. Regardless, I wasn't interested in talking about that terrible instance, not wanting to remember what had happened, of course, but also knowing nothing good would result from recalling such memories. I wouldn't know why that would be, I replied as I turned my head away from the enchantress. Despite not being able to see the Shaloran's face, I could tell that she saw through me immediately. So you do have some idea then, she cheerfully responded. I glanced at her with disgust, viewing the gleam of satisfaction beaming from her eyes, although I couldn't tell what she was satisfied from. Guessingly, she then said, judging from the Ogres' reactions, perhaps it's someone involved in recent fighting experience against those extremists? I couldn't help but dart my eyes away, realizing that they were only telling her how easily and accurately she was reading me. She seemed to giggle a little bit at this, which only served to annoy me more. Regaining her composure, the enchantress then said, the Ogres I spoke to talked at great length about how you had led them here to Elvala, how without your help they would likely not survive in that fight against those magic-hating extremists. However, the more we spoke, the more it became clear that something was amiss. Curiously, no Ogre would say much in regards to you, in whatever it is you did in that battle, despite how important you were to apparently winning it. From what I can understand, there were many Ogres with you too. How were you so pivotal in the Ogres getting here? I heard from the Rangers that you held your own against a couple of wolves, but armed fighters are clearly a step above such hungry animals. You don't strike me as having much experience fighting within a pitched battle like that, as has apparently been described to me. The enchantress intently examined me as she spoke, analyzing me for a hint or clue I would give her. For my own part, I was actively attempting to repress my memories of those recent events, to not relive the mixed emotions that had taken hold of me at that time, to leave them silent and buried. Intent on digging further into me, though, the enchantress continued to press on, unknowingly drawing closer and closer to meeting the darker version of myself. What is it that you are hiding about yourself that the Ogres dare not mention about you? She asked. What immeasurable thing did you perhaps do to help the Ogres through their plight? The enchantress continued on with the more probing questions, one after the other, endlessly, never stopping, until finally I decided she needed to stop. You sense a malevolent feeling rise within you as you start reading through the following paragraph. The characters written look distinct and different from the rest of the text, as if written by a new writer. Cease asking me these questions now! The phrase swiftly escaped from me, though I had no intention of saying it as forcefully as I did. The young Shaloran was immediately taken aback from my statement. Her eyes widened, the smile that one could mistake for a permanent fixture on her face now gone. She began to shiver and sweat profusely, all at once before stammering out, "What?" She shook in her chair, and I could see the fear emanating from her body. I paused again for a moment, tasting the fear, feeling a sense of glee. The sensation I felt, it felt similar from something before. I realized all at once what was happening. My emotions were beginning to take a hold of me. That other me was here. Immediately, I pulled every force of my being away from the enchantress. She instantly jumped out of the chair, scrambling away from me, gasping as the pressure I exerted was lifted. Her eyes were wide now, catching a full glimpse of the darker me within, and now she wanted to do nothing more than to actively hide away. I'm sorry was all I could muster to say as she warily looked at me, seemingly now appearing much older than before. Shakily, she made her way to the door to leave the room, to get to safety, to get away from me. Sometime after she was gone, I realized that a pair of guards would be stationed outside my room. I'm pretty sure they weren't there before the enchantress had come. I soon recovered enough to move around a bit, and I was finally released from the care of the healers. I was given a dwelling in a secluded part of Elvala, a pair of guards stationed here outside at all times here as well. Although I never asked, I was sure they were here to confine me from the rest of the citizens of Elvala. I didn't blame the Shaloran for this. Even now, the other me is still there, trying to influence my thoughts, wanting to escape and lash out. Who knows what sort of actions I might have been pushed to do. I may have gone into a mad-killing rage against any Shaloran I saw, the irony of which is not lost on me, considering my initial reasons for leaving Forlorn Lands so long ago. Chapter 5 Festival of Happiness. It is worth knowing that there are many more Ogres in Elvala after my long period of solitude. Hundreds of them even. Apparently the Ogres tried to petition the Grand Council, and requested that as many of his brethren be sought and saved. Agreeing to the request, secret contact was established in the Nautical Kingdom, as well as some of the human nations, and as many Ogres that could be found were quietly relocated to the Shrouded Shoreline Lands. As I finished fully recovering from my injuries, that was truly when I felt I was at the lowest point of my life. Having all the time in the world to think, I could not stop myself from remembering all events that had happened, from a Spellblaze occurring up to the present I was now. Every waking moment felt as if I was dreaming, whether I was asleep or awake. Yet this nightmare was real. Deep within myself too, that other me from when I fought against the Vanax, it too was trying to claw its way to the surface. I was in a state of indescribable agony and rage, despising my life more and more. It wasn't until a few months had passed since coming to his dwelling, when a visitor would come to see me. I could hear outside the guards talking to someone, the voice being a distinctly deeper tone, obviously belonged to that of an ogre. After a moment, the guards let my visitor in, and I immediately recognized the ogre strategist. With a solemn face he began to speak. "How are you then, Falor? It took some time, but I was finally granted permission to meet with you. Like if it wasn't for you, we ogres would all be dead now, or worse. We never got to properly thank you, for helping us to escape those cultists, and for leading us here to safety in Elvala. Yet, while we were free from our imprisonment, we perhaps led to your own." As the strategist finished speaking those words, he paused to bow his head, and I could sense every ounce of his sadness in that brief moment. Regaining his previous composure though, the strategist raised his head once more to speak. "We figured we would have celebration for everyone," the ogre began. "After all that has happened, everyone is in need of a good dose of cheer, to take our minds off everything that has transpired." Finishing that last sentence, the ogre looked directly into my eyes, as if to add one important addition to it. "With this in mind," the ogre opined, "I asked if you could perhaps be invited as well." I had barely clued in that I was receiving anything more than gratitude from the strategist, but then I realized I was being invited to an assembly of people. Would I be okay, I thought? Could the other me potentially lash out again at someone? "I don't know if that'd be a good idea," I said, trailing off, in the hopes that my uneasiness would be conveyed, not any of the anger or the other emotions that bubbled inside me. Seeing it instead as a moment to speak, the ogre chimed in. "Because you don't know if you'll be able to control yourself and have another incident like you did with that young mage." Taken a bit off guard by this, my eyes grew wide. Yet the strategist said nothing, continuing to stand there with the same solemn face they had entered with. Recovering from his statement, I turned away saying, "I don't want to hurt anybody. It would probably be better if I stayed away, the less contact I have with anyone." My words perhaps hit me the hardest as I stated them. I hadn't realized it until I said it, since I've been busy trying to keep a handle on myself, but I was talking as if I was ready to become a recluse. I had spent over 3 months here lamenting my situation, yet now I was pushing away a chance to free myself from it. All at once, I immediately began to feel my immense emotions, the hatred similar to all the unfortunate occasions I had been in. It was the anger I felt prior to approaching the halfling with a steak knife, or in an instant where I plunged my knife into the masked dwarf. But there was no one here to direct my animosity towards, except yourself. I blanked for a moment when I oversaid those 2 words, connecting with my thoughts perfectly. For a brief moment the hatred I felt within me faded. Getting up, I firmly looked at the strategist and stated, "I accept your offer." The ogre strategist seemed to become ecstatic at this, immediately taking my arm and making way for the door. I couldn't decide if I was perhaps being led or simply dragged by the overly enthusiastic ogre to wherever the festivities were. I suddenly felt happier at that point though, more than I had been in a long while. In the back of my mind, I thought that if there was a chance for a condition to improve, it would perhaps be through the interaction with others. At the very least, it was a way out of my seclusion, and perhaps a way to get my mind off the many past events that were now haunting me. Drawing closer to one of Elvis' main fields, I could hear the voices and sounds of a remote beating up ahead. In front of me, there was a gathering crowd, forming a ring around a stage, their attentive gazes all fixed on a group of dozen ogres who were performing at that moment. Observing the ogres, I noticed that they were steadily becoming a synchronized and captivating dance. Those viewing the ogres seemed to be in little spirit, yet the ogres continued on, progressively picking up the pace of their movements. Little by little, the ogres would move faster, and then they encouraged the crowd to join them by clapping. Slowly as those around began to clap, the mood of the audience began to improve, until I began to see smiles cracking from a few of their faces. As the ogres finished their dance, a couple of Shaloran decided to step forward to entertain the crowds. One began to sing a pleasing chord before stopping, then the other sang the same chord at a lower frequency. Upon finishing the second chord, both Shaloran would harness the sounds to produce a beautiful melody that washed over everyone. Within myself, it felt as if I could feel happier emotions from the times before the Spellblaze. As the acts continued, I felt as if I was regaining a piece of myself that I had lost, and for the first time in a long while, I felt happiness. Without a doubt, the infliction that had taken hold of me was still there, but with each moment, it felt less and less significant. Even as the festivities died down and ended, I continued to feel happy. Making my way back to my dwelling, I felt in control of myself and my actions. Whatever the enigma within me was, it did not and would not lord over me. As I came up to the guards, I smiled and gave a friendly gesture. Though I was heading back in for now, I knew I would leave this dwelling again tomorrow. While the Ogres are quick to note that I saved them from when the conversation touches on past events, in reality I believe that they are the ones who saved me. The Ogres actually dismissed this as modesty, but since that time when I was at the festival, I now have feelings of hope. I have been working to gain full control of over myself and take a hold of my life once more. For that, I say thank you to the Ogres, for the renewed lease on life that they've given me, and for the push they gave to help me move on. Chapter 6: Rebuilding anew. As time passed, both Ogre and Shaloran slowly adapted to their secluded lives from the outside world. The Shaloran slowly gathered their belongings from the abandoned settlements in the north, then quickly worked to create permanent implements that would ensure that the misty smoke concealing Elvala would stay in place. They also expanded the shroud to encompass all the forests nearby and lock down the entirety of the Shaloran peninsula. Many individual Shaloran would begin to study the chaotic energies that had been unleashed by the Spellblaze, in hopes of learning more about the damage it had caused, and what effects it would leave in Maj'Eyal. The Ogres settled down in the southern portions of the peninsula to rebuild new lives for themselves. They helped to grow and harvest food to feed everyone, and took up more laborious jobs that the Shaloran were ill-suited for. Many gave birth to children, resulting in a great many young Ogres running around, helping to bolster their limited numbers dramatically. Some of the Ogres also took up occupations working with ruins and infusions. While my knowledge of ruins is still quite limited, I could tell from their workmanship with infusions that their skills were as good as any Loremasters I knew of back home. Despite some disagreements the Ogres had with the Shaloran, they managed to create a thriving relationship, and I believe that friendship will last for a long time to come. In regards to myself, I want to one day leave Elvala and venture back out into the broad world. I know though that if I was to leave, that I would need to know how to properly defend myself, in case I ever ran into those fanatics or some other foul group that might seek to cause myself or others harm. I also wish to learn about rune magic and where it could be something I myself may want to utilize. Finally, I couldn't ignore the nagging affliction which influences me, or that other me that lay within. I knew that if I ever lost control, my emotions consuming me once more, that I might lash out against those who I did not mean to. With this in mind, I sought the help of those around me, and looked to learn wherever they could teach. I was surprised to find that when I approached about this, both the Shaloran and the Ogres were quite willing to provide me with what they knew. Back home, few Shaloran were interested in sharing their knowledge with others, even between family members it was rare. The exceptions to this, of course, was when a necessity to Shaloran size existed, such as in times of war or other calamity, but even then it was limited. I will note, however, that the Shaloran I approached tend to request something in exchange for educating me, usually asking for monetary compensation. The Ogres, on the other hand, did not, being quite open in sharing their knowledge, one in particular almost overly eager to do so. This was when my instructor, the female Ogre who had helped graft on my rune return, approached with the offer to give me a full breakdown on the application of runes. I was told about a variety that existed, and numerous abilities that they could be employed. I would go on to learn about the basis of their use, being lectured on how they would gather a body's innate inner magic, convert that magic into arcane energy, and mold that energy into an effect that could be employed. On top of this, I would learn that a rune would create a magical buildup within the body when it was activated, which would make subsequent rune use difficult, be it from the same rune or others that might be inscribed. My instructor was also keen to give me a hands-on demonstration regarding the effects of runes, to ensure I truly understood how they worked. I remember when we first started that she abruptly disappeared from in front of me. I was confused as to what had happened and looked around aimlessly, only to hear her start laughing behind me, and then have her appear on my right. I would also be introduced to several Ogres with a multitude of runes, and shown demonstrations of what they could do. As a parting gift, my instructor offered to give me one for my own personal use, a heaping rune. Unlike how my instructor had grafted a rune return onto me before, I inscribed this rune onto my left arm myself, and it is still with me to this day. From the Shaloran, I would learn various skills of battle, specifically in regards to combat equipment. A weaponsmith gave me a rudimentary refresher on how to wield and orient a weapon in combat, before getting me to practice on training dummies, using everything from large swords and hammers to small daggers and clubs, and an assortment of others too. From an armorsmith, I got to learn about the different pieces of production, being drilled on basic stances to position thicker portions toward the enemy, and understanding how to properly wear armor. I would also run a small training course decked out in a full set of plate armor that was lent to me, learning how to maneuver around obstacles and avoid completely exhausting myself in the process. When I was ready, several experienced Ogres in Shaloran would offer to spar with me, this including both fighters and mages. Taking everything that I gained knowledge of and putting it into practice, I engaged in mock battles from opponents using a wildly diverse set of skills. From this I would learn the importance of pacing myself in fight, and to be wary of those techniques a foe might use. I would also learn how to exercise my Heat Beam Ruin to give myself an edge in combat. It wasn't long before I could hold my own in a fight, even against trained and battle-hardened foes, upon which I would be asked if I would be interested in enlisting in the Shaloran military. Figuring it would help in advancing my combat skills further, I accepted the offer, and for several years I would serve as a soldier in Elvala. During my time within the military, I would get to learn a great deal about controlling my inner emotions. Enrolled in a program for those with unique abilities, I would slowly begin to learn more about the dark condition within my body, and how I could use it to my advantage. I would grasp how I could affect my surroundings, both inanimate and living, and in some cases I would even be allowed to practice using dark thoughts against others in controlled skirmishes. I can't say I ever gained full control over the chaotic energies within me, at least not to the extent that the other me had employed against the Fanatics. I could at least direct it away from other people though, even among allies while in the midst of combat. When I look back at the many events that occurred after Spellblaze, I wonder what life might have held for me had I not left to travel as I did. Much time has now passed since the time of my initial journey, but even now I consider where now is the moment that I might leave to explore distant lands, and see what has become of the outside world. I wonder how the rest of the people in Maj'Eyal fare, where the lands have shown any signs of healing, and I'm curious as to what has happened back home as well. Wherever may lie my future, I know that I am now ready to make my way through it. When I do, my escapades will continue once more, and perhaps I'll have another tale to write down too. And that is the end of the first story that I wrote for the Escapades of Fay Willows. And now we'll get to book 5.